Hi, this is going to be the class presentation for Thursday, Friday, March 11th and 12th. Okay, now the assignment that's due at the end of tomorrow is electricity worksheet 1. All right, you will have plenty of time during this class period to work on that, but I want to do a presentation today about electrical power. Okay, and that's going to culminate in an assignment called cost of power assignment, but that won't be due till next week. So don't worry about that. But if you have time, you can start working on it. Okay, so but before I talk about power, I want to talk about I want to do an example of Ohm's law, which you were studying for to complete the electricity worksheet 1. All right, so I'm going to share the screen, and I want to go over an example of Ohm's law, which looks like this. Okay, now. So the voltage across a certain appliance is 120 volts, and the resistance is 20 ohms. Ohms is the unit of resistance. It was named after a German guy by the name of Georg Ohm. All right, and volts, incidentally, is the unit of voltage, and that's named after Alessandro Volta, who was Italian. All right. Okay. Anyway, what's the current? So we're going to use Ohm's law, which in a simplified version looks like this: V is equal to I times R. When we solve for the current, we get V over R. All right, inserting the values, 120 volts over 20 ohms. That's Greek letter omega, which is used to symbolize ohms. All right, and 120 over 20 is 6, and the unit of current is amperes, as you know from electricity worksheet 1. So the current is 6 amperes. All right, so that's just an example of using Ohm's law. Okay, now, electrical power. The equation for power is P is equal to I times V, where I is the current and V is the voltage. All right. Let's use this example. Let's use this equation to calculate the power generated by the appliance in the earlier example. Okay. So voltage 120 volts, current is 6 amps. Power then is I times V, or 6 amps times 120 volts. Okay. All right, numerically, it works out to 720 amp volt. Right. Now, an amp from electricity worksheet 1 is defined as a coulomb per second. A volt, I did not go over this, but a volt is defined as a joule per coulomb. Joule, Joule, was a British guy who did some physics work in the 1800s. Okay, so a volt is a joule per coulomb. Canceling out the coulombs, what we get is a joule per second. I'm never going to test you on this stuff, okay, because I didn't formally present it. So don't worry about that. 720 joules per second. And a joule per second has been defined as a watt, named after another British guy who lived in the 1800s. So the unit for power is the watt. And so the equation for this, or the answer for this, is 720 watts. All right. Okay, now we use electricity all the time, 24/7 without even thinking about it. And we have to pay for that. So I want to go over a little something called cost of power. All right. Now, electricity is a bit of a weird commodity because we have to generate it and we have to use it essentially at the same time. You can't store it. You can't put it on a box and stick it on a shelf. All right, at least not on a large scale. You can on a small scale in batteries, but that's not going to work in a large scale. So we have to generate it in power plants and use it right away. So it's transported to our homes by transmission lines, and they measure it as it comes into our homes, right outside of our home. There's a meter that measures the energy that comes into our home, and we're charged for that energy. Okay. Now, the equation for power, and I did not present this. This is from first semester stuff that I didn't get to, so I'll never test you on this. Power is equal to something called work over time, and work is the same as energy. So power is equal to energy over time. So solving for the energy, we get energy is equal to P times T. Okay. Now, the unit for this, the unit for energy, that could be, we could use a unit of watt times seconds, because watt is a unit of power, second is a unit of time. So watt second could be the unit that they charge it, that they measure it in. However, that's way too small. We use way too many of these. So they invented, or they converted this to a different unit. Instead of watt, they use a kilowatt. 1,000 watts. And instead of a second, they use hours. Okay, and this is the unit of energy that they measure coming into our home. And this is the unit they charge us. This is what we get charged. Okay, they symbolize by kWh, kilowatt hour. Okay. Okay, now here is an actual electric bill. It's my electric bill from a few years ago. All right, back when I lived in Wisconsin. Now there was a meter on my home, and they came out and measured the reading on that date to be that, and about a month earlier it was that, and by subtraction they determined that my home used 728 kilowatt hours of energy for that month. Okay, and that was typical, typical month. All right, now here's what they're charging me for. A facilities charge. I have no idea what that is. State low income. Okay, I'm okay with that. Here, right here, energy, 728 kilowatt hours times, and here's the charge per kilowatt hour. It's about point is small. They should surround that with a zero, right? $0.131110, or about 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So for the energy that I used, 728 times $95.45. That was the fee for the electricity that I used, for the energy that I used. Okay. And then fuel cost adjustment, I don't know what that is. So the total bill was that. So, but here's what I want to focus on. 728 kilowatt hours times that was the charge per kilowatt hour. Okay. Okay. Well, I want you to do a little investigation and find out how much it costs to run some of your stuff. Okay. We'll get to this later, so never mind about that. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And so what I wanted you to do is to do a little investigation about how much it actually costs to run your stuff, because you're going to be paying the electric bills before too long. And so I want you to have a little knowledge of this. Okay, so we're going to do something called a cost of power assignment. Now, let me share the screen once again and show you how to get this. So I'm going to minimize this because I don't need this anymore. And if we go to this week's folder, okay, this week's Schoology folder, scroll down to the bottom, and you will find a cost of power assignment. Okay, open that up, and this is what it's going to say. All right. It says after it opens up, it's going to say cost of power. Choose 2 appliances in your home. 2. For each, find the power rating. It will be on a tag that must be on the appliance. Look for a number with the unit watts. Okay, now for example, the example I'm going to use is a toaster. My parents' toaster. And look for it now on the back, there's a tag, okay, with all sorts of stuff on it. But look on that tag for a unit for a number that has a W as a unit, W being watts. And on here, it's going to be right there, okay, right, hold still, right there, 850 watts. That's the example that I'm going to use. Okay, and for this, you use your stuff. Okay, now what are we going to do with this? Well, let's take a look at cost of power assignment again. For each appliance, use P is equal to I times V to find the current used by the appliance. Assume the voltage is 120 volts. Nationwide, we generate electricity at 120 volts. That's true for nationwide. Okay. All right. So use 120 volts for the voltage. I'm going to do an example of this, so don't freak out yet. Use Ohm's law and the current to find the resistance of the appliance. Okay, this is just to get a little practice using, the power equation and the Ohm's law equation. All right, now part C. Estimate how many hours that the appliance is used in your home each month. This is going to be your estimate. Okay, use this estimate to determine the number of kilowatt hours of energy that is used by that appliance each month. Then, assuming a cost of $0.124 or 12.4 cents per kilowatt hour, find the cost of running the appliance for a month. Now, this I looked it up. This is the cost of the electricity that we're paying for in Sacramento. Okay, about 12.4 cents per kilowatt hour, less than what I paid in Wisconsin. All right, anyway, so we're going to do that for each appliance. Okay, all right. There's also a part 2 to this, but I'll go over that later. So now I want to go over this example. So I'm going to keep the screen actually, and here's my cost of power example. All right, get my toolbar out of the way, and let's run through this from the beginning. Okay, so here's my cost of power example. Now, I'm going to use my parents' toaster. Okay, actually, it turns out that that's the same power rating as the toaster I have in my kitchen. Okay, that I brought from Wisconsin. All right, so anyway, P is equal to I times V. All right, so I'm going to solve this. Remember, we wanted to find the current. I wanted to find the current that is drawn by the toaster. So I'm going to solve this equation for current. So I is equal to P divided by V. Divide each side of this by V. All right, 850 over 120. And my calculator said, after I did that, my calculator said 7.08 amps. So while that toaster is in operation, it's drawing 7.08 amps of current. All right, part B, use Ohm's law and this current to find the resistance. So there's Ohm's law. To find the resistance, divide each side by I, and we get R is equal to V over I. 120 volts once again, divided by the 7.08 amps of current, and it results in a 3 sig figs to 3 sig figs. I get 16.9 ohms of resistance. Okay. All right. Now, this is just to get a little practice using this. Now, part C. Part C. Now, I have to estimate how much that it was in use. Okay. Well, honestly, we don't use the toaster that much, but when my son was still at home, he liked his Pop-Tarts, so he used it 5 minutes a day or so to make his Pop-Tarts, right? So I'm going to estimate 5 minutes a day. Okay. And this is your estimate, whatever you think. Okay. Now, over the course of a month, okay, because I want to find it, remember, we want to find how much it costs to use each month. I'm going to assume a 30-day month. Okay. 5 minutes times 30 days is 150 minutes, which we need to convert to hours. I need to find the number of kilowatt hours of energy. So I need the time in hours. I also need the watts in kilowatts. So I need to convert the watts to kilowatts. And the big Z, that's three places to the left. So 0.850 kilowatts. All right. So there's the time that it is in use. Here's the power that it draws. So I can find the energy by multiplying the power times the time to get kilowatt hours. All right. And when I multiply this, I get 0.850 kilowatts times 2.5 hours. And it's 2.125 kilowatt hours of energy that toaster used in the month. Okay. And then the cost of that will be that number of kilowatt hours times $0.124 per kilowatt hour. And that worked out to the nearest penny, and calculated to the nearest penny, cost me 30 cents. So over the course of the month, it cost me 30 cents to operate that toaster. Okay. Which isn't that much, of course. However, you have a lot of things that that use energy in your home, not just a toaster, but a whole bunch of other stuff, and it adds up. Okay, and now you're going to get an idea about why your parents, maybe they don't, but I did, to yell at your kids to turn the lights off when they leave a room. Okay, because it draws energy that you have to pay for, right? Okay, so I want you to do that for 2 appliances in your home. Now, don't use things like cell phone chargers, for example, because they're not, even though they're plugged in, they're not always in operation. They're only charging for the time that the battery needs to be charged, right? And so you don't really know how long that's running. So that's not a very good example to use. A microwave is a good example to use because you can estimate how long that is in operation. A computer, and it uses varying amounts of power, determining on what you're doing with it. So I wouldn't use a computer either. A hair dryer, okay, is a pretty good example. A microwave, toaster, but you can't use 850 watts. Okay, you can't use 850 watts. That's my example. I don't know, smoothie maker, or coffee maker, something like that. Okay, and if you can't find the tag okay, then use something else, all right? Because you need to know what the power rating for that is, okay? So I want you to do that for 2 appliances, all right? Okay, now there is a part 2 to this, and this is going to be optional. This is going to be bonus. If you want to get a few bonus points, here's what you can do as for some bonus, okay? Excuse me. Part 2, I want to talk about light bulbs. Now, in the old days of incandescent light bulbs, and to be honest, I don't even have one anymore. But if you still have incandescent light bulbs in your home, we want to, this is dated, but we're going to use this example anyway. A 60-watt light bulb, okay? This is actually, before I do that, let me stop sharing for a moment, because this is, oh, actually, I do want to share, but I want to get someplace else. So, excuse me for a moment. I'm going to go previous to this. Previous, and I'm going to escape out of here. Oops, let me get to there. And then I want to get back to the cost of power assignment. If you scroll down to page 2, there's the work for the first appliance. There's the work for the second appliance. And here's part 2. How much money will you save by using compact fluorescent light bulbs instead of incandescents? And actually, this is even a little bit dated. I should have changed this to LEDs, okay? Because I'm going to use an example of an LED. All right. So how much money will you save by using LED light bulbs instead of incandescents? To find out, oh dear, I have to actually change my example here. This is a little bit dated. I will change that by the time you open this document, okay? But here's what we're going to do. We're going to find a light bulb that is on in your home much of the time, okay? What is the wattage of this light bulb? Okay, I'm going to assume 60 watts for the incandescent. How many hours is this light bulb on in a typical day? How much energy does this bulb use in a day? How much energy does this use in a year? Okay, and then if each kilowatt, and I have to change this, I forgot to change this part of my sheet. It'll be different by the time you see it. If each kilowatt costs $0.124, how much energy per year? What's the energy cost per year? Okay. And then we're going to do that same calculation with an LED. All right. Okay. So here's my example. I'm going to minimize this and get back to my example. Okay. There's my toaster example. Okay. Now, part 2. Let's say the wattage, this is typical of old incandescents, 60-watt light bulbs. Okay. I'm going to assume that it's on 4 hours a day. All right. Because, you know, if this is in a lamp in my living room, I turn it on around, I don't know, 6:30 or something when it's starting to get dark, and it just stays on until I go to bed at 10:30. Okay. So it's on about 4 hours a day. That's an estimate. That's your estimate. Okay. All right. Now I want to find the kilowatt hours and then the cost. 60 watts is 0.060 kilowatts. I move the decimal point 3 places. Over the course of a day, it uses 0.24 kilowatt hours of energy per day. Okay. Over the course of a year, considering 365 days in a year, that bulb uses 87.6 kilowatt hours of energy per year. And then the cost of running that is $10.86. Okay, $10.86. Now, what would it cost me to use an LED? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Okay, stop sharing. Now, this is an LED. Okay, I'm not advertising the brand, but LED, and it's equivalent to 60 watts. We're replacing 60 watts, but it only uses 9 watts of power. Okay, it only uses 9 watts of power. I get the same amount of light, but instead of using 60 watts of power for an old incandescent, and this LED, it uses 9 watts. Okay, so let's do the same calculation. Let's do the same calculation using a 9-watt LED. Okay, now same process. It's on 4 hours a day, same lamp. Okay, and then 9 watts is 0.009 kilowatts. Okay, and if I use times 4 hours per day, I get 0.036 kilowatt hours per day. Okay. In a year, that works out to be 13.14 kilowatt hours of energy per year. All right. And then multiplying that by the cost was $0.124 per kilowatt hour, we get a cost of $1.63. Okay, now how much do I save by using LEDs? By using this LED, how much do I save per year? Well, $10.86, that was the cost of running the incandescent. $1.63, that's the cost of running the LED, $9.23. I saved $9.23 for that, for using this one bulb instead of the old ancient incandescents. Okay, and that's way more than the cost of this bulb. So this bulb pays for, do these cost a little bit more than incandescents? Yeah, they do, but they certainly pay for themselves, you know, in less than a year. And by the way, these LEDs will last much, much longer than old incandescents also. So, you know, this example is a little bit dated because years and years ago, you know, incandescents were the light bulb to use. But now, compact fluorescents, which are okay, but LEDs are better. LEDs are better. The cost saving is incredible, okay, and they last longer. There are some bulbs, LEDs last longer than incandescents as well. Okay, so that's our cost of power example, and that's what I would like you to do in the cost of power assignment. Okay, now the actual assignment is just the front side of this, part one, the two appliances. If you want to do the part two, actually I'm going to leave this compact fluorescent example because we have an equivalent table. You can do this for a compact fluorescent in case you have some of those, the ones with the swirly kind. I don't know that my parents have any of those. The ones that, you know, like that look like a spiral. Okay, those are compact fluorescents. Those are okay. LEDs are better, but do the example for a compact fluorescent. Okay, and then if you want to, and then I had, what are your energy savings for this bulb? And then how many light bulbs are in your house? I literally had kids walk around their house counting the number of light bulbs. Typically turned out to be around 70, you know, around 70, 80 light bulbs in your home. And then if you multiply that savings per bulb times the savings, it turns out to be a lot. All right. Okay. I'm going to conclude the class with that. Okay. You have the rest of the time to work on electricity worksheet 1, which is due at the end of the day, Friday. And then the cost of power assignment, which I'm going to make due at the end of next Wednesday. All right. Okay. Thank you. And I'll see you soon.